Hello. Yeah, hi. This is the first of a little series of things we're doing with our Patreon. We're looking at basically games I've done in the past before I was a professional game designer. There are a lot of them. Some of it might be games, some might be additional content for existing games. There was a lot of stuff, for example, for Games Workshop stuff while I was working in Games Workshop retail. That was kind of where I cut my teeth really on a lot of game design stuff. But yeah, today we're going to look at something which is kind of special. This is Razordisc, or End Zone as it was originally called. And this was a game which I wrote. It was the first thing I did with Mantic. It was done before I properly got together with them. I was a freelancer. It was my first game design gig at all. An old boss of mine knew that I was really keen to design games for a living, and he ended up working with Mantic and suggesting to them that I could help them write the sci-fi sports game they wanted to write. So I came up with a thing called Razordisc and pitched it to them. They liked it, but they didn't like the fact that I was brand new to the industry and a bit green. They wanted someone who could kind of take the reins and do the project management, the organisation, all that sort of stuff, as well as just the game design, which I really was in no place to do. So they got Jake Thornton involved, and I worked with him on the game that became DreadBall. Now, opinions vary on how much of Razordisc made it into DreadBall. I've always thought there's quite a lot of the same DNA in there, certainly a lot of the same design DNA. Jake's been quite adamant that DreadBall's entirely an original vision. At the end of the day, I think design is one of those things where everyone who designs stuff, you always draw inspiration from things, and it's impossible to say exactly what it is, that has inspired something. So who knows? I mean, Jake actually said he's never even read this that I sent him. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe he didn't. But yeah, cool. Anyway, so this is Razordisc. I'm opening these files for the first time in quite a few years. So I've got them all opened and ready to go. They were using my standard chaotic filing system, about 1 million versions of each file, but I think I've got the most up-to-date one of each. And we're going to have a little look, and together we're going to trawl through Razordisc and see what we think of it. I'm going to critique it as though someone else had written it, although probably slightly harsher because you're always your own worst critic. So yeah, what you can see here is the Razordisc board. Razordisc, I should tell you first up, is a sci-fi sports game where teams of players from Mantic's Warpath universe compete to score points. I forget exactly what the points are called in this, but you're scoring points by flinging a razor-sharp frisbee, because who needs a ball? It's the future, right? Into a goal area. You can see the goal area at the top and bottom of the screen there. I'm going to turn on the mouse pointer thing so I can point. This is going to make things look really weird for a second. Bear with me. How do I do this? It's here, I think. Okay, it's already capturing the cursor. That's good. Okay. So it was actually, you didn't need to see this weird thing that's happening here. Hey, look, I'm on camera. Yippee! Can I point? Can I point? I can point bits of the screen. Not really. It's not going to work, is it? Anyway, yeah. So this is the board. Razordisc was one of the first kind of things that I hit on. Was I wanted it to be hexes. So the thing was, the game was always going to draw comparisons to Blood Bowl, and I knew that. I think Mantic knew that. I hope Jake knew that with DreadBall, because I certainly said it to him enough times. But yeah, as a game, you're looking at a sci-fi or / fantasy sports game based in the universe that's been established by a tabletop war game featuring fantasy races. You're gonna draw comparisons whatever you do. So what my aim was throughout this, and actually throughout DreadBall, was to make a game which was very distinct from Blood Bowl, which stood up on its own merit. I have played Blood Bowl for a long time. As many of you might know, I ran Blood Bowl in the last few years for Games Workshop. I've played it for, as well, I think I first played it in the mid-90s, probably. And I've played it ever since. I love it. But I wanted to do a game that felt very different, so that there would be room on your board game shelf for both of them. Because I think as long as two games feel different, having the same sort of theme and overall construction, that doesn't matter so much. As long as the game feels different and offers different challenges, that's fine. You'll want them both. So yeah, the board is here. It's going to draw comparison straight away to a DreadBall board, I think, because it's hexes. It's got a little scatter diagram thing, which eventually got integrated into the DreadBall board, I think, in the new edition. And yeah, you've got like a board area. You've got various different parts. Now, let me see if I can remember this right. I think this is the it might not have a name, which is the general play area. That's an end zone. That is a dead zone, which makes me chuckle a little bit, because that's the name that ended up getting used for a Mantic game years later, although I'm sure it's purely coincidence. I'm sure that there's no correlation there at all. I think these are disc spawn areas, and this is possibly the initial disc spawn, and this is where you score your points, and these were the keeper spaces where someone can stand in front of the goal and deflect shots. So one big difference straight away from DreadBall is there's only one place to score, and the three places to score, that was definitely Jake's idea, and that was a great idea. That really makes DreadBall feel different from a lot of other games. Although one thing I will say is that the board is massive. One of the considerations I make now when I make a game, I'm going to drink some tea, 1 second. One of the considerations I make, I put sugar in tea actually, and I haven't, so I'm going to do that now. Yeah, one of the considerations I make when I design a game now is the size of the board. So with this, I've got no idea how big this is printed out. In fact, I'm fairly certain it's pretty darn large. But for anyone who wants to do board game design, a great thing to think about is how big can you comfortably make your board and still have it fold away into a sensible box. Because board game players tend to be, and I say this as a board game player, they tend to be quite fussy about their storage. People like it when games are a uniform size that will fit into a uniform set of board game shelving, which means that you can't have your box too big. A lot of games do it, and I'm not saying it hurts their sales, but certainly if you're a small designer, not a small designer, but you're a designer from a small company, or you're doing things yourself and you want to get yourself noticed, don't do anything that's going to aggravate people. It's kind of common sense. So yeah, when it comes to designing a board, what I do now is I look at the dimensions of the box that it's likely to be in, and sort of quadruple that, and that'll give me like a fourfold box shape. The idea being that is probably as big as I want my board to get, and if I want to go bigger than that, well, add 2 more on the side, make it a 6-fold. What do you call that? A sextuple fold? I don't know. One of the boards that folds out and then folds out again, like Pandemic or any of those sorts of things. So yeah, that's kind of the considerations to think of when designing the board for a game. But this, as you can see here, is massive, considering these hexes are going to be about 25 mil, I think. Of course, when I was designing this, Mantic didn't have any hexagonal bases. They just brought out round bases with their first lot of Warpath minis. The hex base would later be a thing in DreadBall. But yeah, I mean, I was aiming at the same kind of size hex that they ended up with. So, and also the other thing is that this is a really big play area. And I think one thing that DreadBall does better than Blood Bowl is keeping the action tight and compact. So in Blood Bowl, there are often parts of the pitch where nothing happens for a while. And don't get me wrong, there are times when that can become vital to the outcome of a game, where someone makes a break into an open part of the field, that sort of thing. But generally, for the kind of quick playing, speedy game we were going for here, that's not really what you want. So yeah, that's a quick look at the board. Let's dive into the rules, shall we, and see what we can find. So this is the first thing here. It's the play board, which is It was intended to be a central, piece that was off to one side. It could have also been integrated into the board, I suppose, if the board had shrunk down a fair bit. But yeah, what we've got is got a scoreboard for each team, a drive track for each team. Now, drives were the term I was using. It's also used in Blood Bowl, and it's a general sporting term anyway. Tea is useful. But yeah, as you can see here now, I've forgotten how this works, so you're learning with me. But it looks like we've got 5 drives for each team. And down here was the momentum pool. Now this was a mechanic that I liked, and I would love to go back and revisit this. To be fair, I would love to go back and revisit this entire game and repackage it, maybe put it up as a downloadable thing. I don't think I'd want to release it as a game for reals, because it's quite derivative of a lot of other things that are out there now. And also, you've already got Blood Bowl, DreadBall and Guild Ball. I don't think there's really room for another sports game that's that sort of, team chucking a thing down a pitch and trying to score points. I think there are sports games that can still be done that are interesting, but I think this kind of thing is sort of played out right now. So yeah, but momentum was a thing. We'll look at that in a minute in more detail. From what I remember of it, it was something like as you did cool stuff, you got momentum points, which you could then spend to do more cool stuff. There is an issue there. There is the old boulder rolling down the hill momentum issue, well, literally momentum issue, where one player can really break away and start doing very good things, which lets them do more good things. But we'll come to that when we look at the rules themselves. Here is a reference sheet. So one thing I've always struggled with, and I still do to this day, is too many words. I do it when I'm talking, I do it when I'm writing. I make a big effort these days to break that down and write less. But as you can see here, lots of words on a page. Now, of course, what we're looking at is a pre-layout kind of thing. This is a prototype, a very rough prototype. And yeah, of course, it's going to look a bit messy, but you never want this much text on a page, really, for a reference sheet. I think it's one thing that the Blood Bowl reference sheet in the new edition could have done better in hindsight. I think there was, the reference sheet was just blocks of text, and it saves you flicking to the right page, but it doesn't really feel like it's doing what a reference sheet should do, which is a quick reference to glance at during the game. So yeah, what we've got here is some things about stat checks for different types of thing. So we've got 4 main tests. You've got throwing the disc, intercepting, attacking, and recovery. We've got actions. We've got an action point system here. We're now getting into territory of stuff that I've forgotten, so this is going to be interesting. So it looks like it's an action point system. I can't remember how many action points you get or how they work, but it looks like you've got different things that do stuff. So 1 action point to move to an adjacent unoccupied hex. So I'm going to guess you get a number of action points, quite a few, probably 5 or 6 per player, and you can use those to move, but if you want to do anything else, it's going to reduce your movement effectively. Is that the clearest way to do it? I don't know. Let's have a look. Marking. If you're adjacent to one and only one enemy, you're marking him. That's interesting. So these days I don't use gendered pronouns in games. I default to they, which can get confusing. Especially, I've discovered that American audiences are not as comfortable with using they as a general he slash she slash whichever. And sorry, that didn't mean to sound dismissive of any people with other pronouns. I apologise completely. It's 10 to 10 in the morning, but I'm early. I have not had enough caffeine. My point is that these days I would never write him in a set of rules, because you are making a lot of assumptions there about a game. I say I default to they. I think it's the cleanest way to do it. Which, it keeps things nice and neutral until we can have customized rulebooks which allow us to switch to the appropriate gender on the fly. I think that's going to be the way to go. Anyway, that's a quick aside. Marking is marked players ignore one success on stat checks for each player marking them, and will be blocked if they start the turn marked. We've got a bolded rules term there. Okie dokie. For our reference sheet, it's a little bit odd that there's the word a rules term that's been bolded out there, but there isn't an explanation of what that is. But I'm sure we'll come to that later. Momentum cost. So here's what I was talking about with momentum. So you earn momentum when you score a goal, intercept, injure an opponent, or you're holding a disc at the end of your turn. So that's interesting. So just possession gives you momentum. And you can spend it to add 1 dice for a stat check, get a bonus action point, or do a combo play. Now this is ringing a bell, but I won't go into it till we get to it in the rules. So yeah, let's actually look at the rules, shall we? Before we do, let's look at the teams. So we've got 3 teams here, which were based on the things that were in Warpath at the time. So Warpath's first miniatures were the Marauders, who are your orcs, and the Forge Fathers, who are your kind of space dwarves. I also did a corporation team because I remember Alessio Cavatore told me that whenever he designs a game, he always starts with a human stat line whenever he designed like a fantasy war game or something. And so I figured there should definitely be a human team in here, and of course it was the corporation which Mantic were proposing as their human race. So there's some interesting stuff here. So I think I took the brief a little bit too literally here, which was the brief was to make the teams, relate to the Warpath factions. So the Marauders here, Senseless Brutality, that's a very good Speedball style name. We've got Grunts, Stunts, Rippers and Jumpers, which I think were the 4 units that were available to the Marauder army. And we also have Steel Warriors. So I call them Steel Runners because they're not warriors in a sports game. That always bugs me in old Blood Bowl, and people who have seen the new Blood Bowl will probably spot this. It really annoyed me when you got warriors in a sports game, because why are they warriors? It's a sports game. Unless you're using it euphemistically, of course. So yeah, Steel Runners, Long Arms, Huskarls and Forge Guards. I think the Long Arms weren't a thing. They were brought in just for this. So I wrote that myself. I wrote that word my very self. I typed it with my fingers on the keys, and that word appeared on there apropos of nothing. But yes, they were generally things which are taken directly from the different unit types in Warpath. But I think it would have been more sensible just to give them player names, as DreadBall ended up doing. And again, it's a thing from Blood Bowl where there was a time when the High Elf Blood Bowl team had Phoenix Warriors and White Lions and things, but they didn't have White Lions today. It was Phoenix Warriors and Lion Warriors. I'm going back a few years now, but the point was that they were based off the High Elf army book quite directly. The assumption being that whichever unit you fight in a war, that'll be the position you play when you play the sports, which is weird. Interestingly, for the corporation team, that isn't the case because there wasn't a corporation army at the time. So you've got runners, handlers, blockers, and cutters, all of which I think, if I recall, cutter at least, are terms from Ultimate Frisbee. Because let's face it, this is weaponized Ultimate Frisbee. So yes, we've got 4 stats: action, power, disc, and stamina. We've got special, so a special rule for each team. Looks like one player on each team's got a special rule. They're very wordy. I suppose that is kind of the equivalent of a Blood Bowl or DreadBall skill, which would be written in there normally with the main text written elsewhere. And we've got some other things: teamwork, starting momentum, and what the team consists of. So 6 runners, 2 handlers, 2 blockers, 1 cutter. So that's 11, 10, 9, 13. So different starting numbers. That's interesting. Right, okay, so yeah, with that in mind, let's look at the rules themselves now. First thing, and I've already had a little look at the first page of this, and I rolled my eyes and shook my head because I made the mistake that a lot of novice game designers make. I don't mean to sound disrespectful when I say novice game designers, because I think that actually any gamer Anyone who plays games can design games. That's not difficult. When I say novice, what I'm referring to is the craft of game design, as in knowing what things you do in what order, that sort of thing. We actually codify this a little bit on the Needy Cat Games website. Let me open this up. So I need to update this so badly. It's really out of date. Especially that picture of me. That picture of me is so out of date now. You can see a direct comparison right now. But anyway, yes. So we have a very codified game design process, which is the result of a lot of discussion, a lot of theory, a lot of number crunching. But yeah, this is our game design process. It is 9 stages, and obviously no two projects are alike, but this is a really good way of looking at a broad overview of things. So start with the kickoff, just a chat with the client, R&D, and then what we're going to is the test build. Now the test build, this is really the stage that Razordisc is at, because let's not look at it yet. The test build is the first time you're showing the game to the client. So what we've got here is, at this stage, you want the game to be the equivalent of what the video game industry calls a vertical slice, which is, it's a demo of all the key features of the game in one place. It's like I think the word I use here is, it's a snapshot of gameplay. So you want to be able to show them, how does a turn play out? How does 10 minutes of gameplay look? And that is all you want to do. So the rules will be sketched out. They will have, bullet points at best. The components will be dead simple. I've got the dead simple components. What I've done though in this is I've started writing things like color text and laying out a document, which should not happen until down here. Well, laying out very roughly should be the mechanical draft. Your color text doesn't come into the full draft, which is stage 6. So what I'm doing here is the mistake that a lot of rookie game designers make, which is I'm putting the cart before the horse, really, trying to do lots of detailed design work before knowing whether a thing is right for what the client wants, whether the proof of concept holds up. So yeah, I've got a lovely, well-written bit of color text here. I'm not going to read it because it will make my brain explode with embarrassment. Because anyone who writes anything, ask them to write something ask them to read something they wrote 10 years ago, and they'll be upset. So yeah, there's that. There's a bit of background. Interestingly, some of this stuff actually made it into the DreadBall background. Razordisc itself is mentioned in DreadBall as a precursor to DreadBall. It was a sport which was overtaken in popularity by DreadBall and is now only played by hipsters, on college campuses. So yeah, here we are, we're into the rules themselves. The arena. So so this is another weird artifact of rookie game design, is we go straight from color text, which is a thing that you would only really see in a finished rulebook, into detailed rules without any kind of any kind of introduction. This is how the game works, this is what you're playing, this is the aim of the game, straight into detail. Also, it looks like I've inserted a JPEG into a document, which never goes well. Cool. It might be a TIFF, I don't know. Game design people, layout people who are watching this, please let me know. So the arena is divided into hexagonal spaces referred to as hexes. So here are the areas. Okay, so we've got the goal in blue, the red hex is the goal zone. The grey area is the mid zone. Okay, so emergency reserves can only enter play here. So I remember there was an emergency reserves teleporter, but we'll come back to that. The black hexes are disc shoots. So pink, I still use this. Pink, it means that this is updated from the previous version of this. So it looks like I've made a change to how disc shoots work, or what they're called. Central shoot is surrounded by numbers that are used when choosing random direction, aka deviating. Oh, the ball can deviate. What a deviant ball. I've got a history as well of using unusual terms in the interest of being unique. One of the things that really characterised me, and I think I've got over it to a degree, but for a long time I hated doing the same thing that everyone else had already done. So if a term had been used somewhere else, I wouldn't want to use it. What I've learned since is sometimes there's just a right term for something, you know. And actually, it's the equivalent of when you play an Xbox drivey combat game, like a GTA style thing, and it goes out of its way to make right trigger not the drive forward button. It's nonsense. Or, you know, in a first-person shooter, right trigger should be the shoot button. Sometimes you get games that don't do that. Not really anymore. I think they've kind of learned that that's a bad thing to do. But for many years, there were games that would try to buck the trend just to be different. And all it meant was that you played it and went, oh, screw this, I'm going back to the game I know. Yeah, cool. So here are the dead zones I talked about, dark grey areas in the corners. The idea was it was going to be difficult to shoot from there. In hindsight, just get rid of them. You don't need them. DreadBall hasn't got those. I kind of had this idea that a sports field has to be rectangular. But of course it doesn't. So that's that. And the end zone is here, which is where you start your drive. Okay, so your team starts in the end zone and then you rush forwards. Which, yeah, there's a lot of dead space, isn't there, between the two? That, to me, is... that shows where my head was at from a games point of view. I was playing a lot of war games, a lot of Warhammer, a lot of that sort of thing, where you have your army deployment zone and there's a big bit of open ground in the middle. I don't think, and please correct me here, I don't think there are any sports where you have to start, you know, more than half the pitch length away from the other team. It would just make the start of the game a mad dash without any action happening, which is exactly what would happen here. I'm paranoid that I'm not recording, so bear with me. I'm just going to double check. I am recording, that's okay, and I'm in shot. This is all okay. I can only see myself now. I can't see what I'm doing on screen until I go back to this. Oh, good! You get to see all my Facebook notifications as well. That's nice. I might block those. Anyway, yes. So we're into the game itself. So now we're into the overview. So this really should be at the start, because why are you telling me about what the board is before you tell me how or what I'm using it for? Flow of information is another thing which a lot of novice game designers get wrong. They put things in a weird random order, almost like the order in which it occurs to them. That's what I've done here. I think I've thought, well, you're going to need to play on the board. The board, you know, the arena is a separate component. So let's tell you how that works before we tell you what you're trying to do. So it's a two-player game between two futuristic sports teams in the Warpath universe. The aim of the game is to outthink and outmaneuver your opponent so that you can score points by throwing the disc through the goal. Okay, I think I might have gone a little bit too detailed there. You can score points by throwing the disc through his goal. Yeah, I would tell myself to simplify that down a little bit. Of course, scoring points. Okay, this is one that I'm also guilty of in my writing. Hopefully not as much anymore because it makes me cringe. It's this daytime TV voiceover, well, you know, game show host kind of thing. Of course, scoring points is only one way to get ahead. It just feels a bit disingenuous, you know, and it's extra words for the sake of extra words. The rules allow for all-out combat, casualties, etc., etc. If an player, come on, old James, sort out your typos. If a player is carrying the disc towards the goal, it's only expected that the defenders will tear him limb from limb if that's what it takes to stop him. Yeah, it's bad writing, basically. Write better, write more good, write less bad. So I wrote this to give you, you know, it's not actually 10 years this would have been about 6 or 7 years ago. So this is when we first moved to Nottingham. I'd started working on the game when we were in London still. Working in Games Workshop retail, just at the end of that as I was leaving retail, and then we both decided we were sick of London prices. We couldn't afford to do anything, and we were spending half our lives commuting. So we moved away, and we got a map out and decided let's go to Nottingham. Nottingham's pretty cool, right? We just literally just almost threw darts at a map, looked at places we liked, and scored them all on things like career prospects, crime rate, pricing. So I think it was down between Devon, Worthing and Nottingham. So Exeter, I think Exeter, Worthing and Nottingham. And Nottingham won because, I mean, let's face it, it was where I wanted to go career-wise. and that all worked out. So yeah, so I wrote this about 6 years ago. A lot can change in 6 years. To be fair, I look back at things that I wrote a month ago and cringe sometimes. So that's just the life of a creative person, I suppose. Constant self-doubt. So yeah, scoring points and injuring opponents gets the crowd rooting for your team and rooting for your team. And this builds momentum, which can be used to pull off spectacular plays during the game. Currently 3 teams available. So this is it's weird. It's written as like sort of faux advertising copy. Who is the intended reader is the question I would ask my past self here. This is the whole point of this rule book, which doesn't even need to exist. The purpose of this is that I can give this to the Mantic people, or rather I can show it to them and play them through a game, and then they will decide we like it or we don't. It doesn't need to be written to an audience, and all the effort I put into writing this could have been spent playing the game and tweaking it more, and working out what works, what doesn't. So yeah. Look at that. That's just... This is my background in customer-facing roles coming to the fore. Anyway, terminology and dice and terminology. There are certain things I want to know about when I see a dice section in a game. You often see this in war games or that sort of thing. Games which feel the need to explain what a dice is or what die is. I often just use dice in the singular as well as the plural. It's a house style thing at Games Workshop, and it's just stuck with me. And also, I mean, I don't say die in real life. I say that's a dice, which might be wrong, but I think it's creeping into common usage. So the linguistics geek in me says it's probably okay. Digression. Dice and terminology. Use a regular 6-sided dice for all rolls. Occasionally, the rules will call for a D3 to roll the 6-sided dice and half the result. D3s in games, yeah, okay, if you have to. It's nicer to use a custom dice these days, but I think when this came out, that wasn't such a thing. When it was written, I mean, we haven't got rules about how re-rolls work or roll-offs. I always put those in now when I write about dice in games. For the purpose of the rules, people playing the game are referred to as coaches. Models in the arena are players. So that's true in Blood Bowl and DreadBall as well. I think it's just good when you have players and players, it can get a bit confusing. Yeah, it's cool. So we set up. I'll skip most of this stuff. Get a team each, set the board up on a suitable flat space. I'm glad you told me that, because otherwise I was going to try to put it on a wall. That should be done. Let's make magnetic Razordisc. See, to go here. Yep. Oh, so all the momentum counters go on the momentum pool on the playboard, and you take the number of starting momentum tokens for your team. So I find it odd these days when you have a central pool kind of thing. So that is this here, and then you take things off that to put them in front of you. They should go somewhere. You should have like a little space on a sheet or on your side of the board or something. Maybe in those little maybe these bits down here could be where you put your momentum. Just get rid of those and do that. Let's go back to the rules. Teams and players. So you've got stats. The higher a stat, the stronger a player is. Action is how many actions you can take in a turn. Power is how hard you can hit. Disc skill is your proficiency at throwing and intercepting. And stamina is your ability to stay on your feet. Now that's misleading. I bet that stamina is actually about taking hits and it's resilience. That makes it sound like an agility kind of thing. It's a use of not a cliche. There's a term, isn't there? It's a cliche or something like it. An idiom, there we go. It's use of an idiom, which is just going to confuse some people. It will cause trouble when the game comes to be translated, if that's going to be the case, into a different language. But that's that. And yeah, additional special rules. So yeah, avoid things like that, I would say to my past self. I wonder. Stats. Yeah, we use the term stats. A bit of a jargon term. We haven't bolded it. We bolded some rules terms earlier, didn't we? But we're not doing it consistently. Stat is it's an abbreviation if you want to use it. Fair play, but characteristics probably is a better term, or values. I don't know. Values. What does your player hold dear? But yeah, stat check. So how does a stat check work? Do tell me. So we've written as power check or disc skill check. Yep, fair enough. Take a number of dice equal to the value of the stat. That's your dice pool. Some of this is sounding quite familiar actually. I think I've reused these things in later years. Some situations will add bonus dice or subtract penalty dice, collectively known as modifiers. Roll all the dice. Everyone that's a 4 or higher is a success. So it's a dice pool. 4+ is the winner. And 6s explode. That sounds familiar, doesn't it, to DreadBall players? And you can keep on doing that, and you can spend successes. Okay, so this was a thing which, yeah, here we are. I remember this now. Spending successes was an interesting idea, but actually quite clunky. And I remember whenever I played this, it was a thing which always took a little bit to explain to people. I've just remembered something important, so I'm going to go and do that for a moment. I'm going to pause the recording, and then I'm going to come back in a moment. I'm back. Also, I'm going to say as well, sorry about the lighting. It's just fluorescent office lights in here, which make me look awesome. This is me in my scruffiest true form. Right, yeah. Also, I don't know, is this kind of little me in a corner thing, is this good? Would you rather just have the stuff on the screen? That's the question I have. Let me know in the comments. Would you rather just have this without me down here? Let me know. Anyway, yeah, spending successes. We'll come back to how the stat checks work in a little bit. What is weird though, from a rules point of view, from a design point of view, is that the stat check is described here, but only half of it is, because how you spend successes isn't given any context. So it leaves you hanging. It says it'll be detailed later, so you have to, when you come to it later, you'll have to flick back to this section to see how it works. Any rule that makes people flick back and forth is just unnecessary. Repeat information if you have to. Don't make people flick back and forth. The disc. So you get a disc counter, which is never considered to occupy a hex. If you move into a hex with a disc, you pick it up automatically. That's lovely, nice and quick. You take it with you as you move and hold it till you throw it. You give it away, you're knocked down, or it's stolen from you. Sometimes it travels in a random direction. This is deviation. Determine which direction it deviates, roll the dice and compare it to the numbers around the disc spawn. If a player is knocked down or the disc enters an occupied hex, if a player is knocked down or the disc enters a hex occupied by a knocked down player, it will slide. Make a deviation roll as above and move the disc a single hex in that direction. Yep. And if you throw it and it misses, it will drift from the target hex. So it's a slide, but it goes D3. So this is, it's 3 different terms around scattering. So I would attempt to just call it scattering for a start, because it's a term people have come to know. I suppose maybe that's not so bad. But splitting out slide and drift is 2 things. I see where I'm coming from. The idea is that a slide is across the floor, whereas a drift is it, you know, moving weirdly as you throw it. My first instinct is that that's going to be complex to learn. I can't remember enough about, you know, how people did get on with it, but yeah, that's one to think about maybe if I were to, you know, say something to my old self. Yeah, so the disc spawning. Disc spawns at the start of a drive, after a goal, or after it leaves the arena. Whenever it spawns, it's fired into the arena from one of the 3 disc shoots. So interestingly, we haven't had drive or goal explained yet. We don't know what those things are, but you know, we've told ourselves here these are we know some rules that are attached to them, but we don't know yet what they are, which is bad flow of information yet again. So here we go. Here's some more pink text, which means some stuff's changed. So it's fired into the arena for a disc shoot. After a goal, it drifts from the opposite end's disc shoot. Now, my first thought on that is that that's quite exploitable. So as soon as you score, the other team can grab it right by your goal and score again. I see where it's coming from. It's kind of, I think that's intended as like a leveling mechanic. So you're going to give the ball to the other team, put it in their, sorry, the disc to the other team, put it in their territory after you've scored. No, that's not right at all, is it? No, if after you've scored, hang on. Let's go to the diagram. So you're this team down here. You're the bottom team against the top team. You run up here. You score there. The ball reappears down here. So if they're attacking, it'll be near your goal, so they'll be able to score it. But if not, if you've got a good defence, you can grab it and throw it back up again. So that could be flawed inherently. Start with drive after leaving the arena. It drifts from the central disc shoot. So it's going to drift. So D3. So it's going to be in this kind of area around here, which means, well, you're immediately, based on a dice roll, giving an advantage to one player or the other in the game. Because if it goes down this way, then well, this team will just immediately got possession. There's no way this team can get to it. So that's not the best design, I would say. Interestingly, having the ball pop out of the middle is a thing I've used in another game, which isn't out for a while yet. So yeah, there's that. Cool. So yeah, so that's disc spawning. Interestingly, I think this is the thing that went into DreadBall, which is that after the disc, after a goal is scored, you just carry on playing. That continuous play thing, which I think hasn't really been done much in other games. Although I've got to admit, I've not actually played Guild Ball, so I don't know if they. Although they follow football pretty closely, so they would, in theory, reset after a score. Anyway, here's the edge. I've written about the edge in several games. I keep putting the edge in. I'm not a closet U2 fan. I don't know. It's weird. I don't know why I keep trying to use it. It's a weird term and shouldn't be used. I get, he's got the edge. It is a thing, but it just feels a bit weird from a rules point of view. But yeah, so you roll off to see who gets the edge for the turn, which is a teamwork check. So if we had Corporation versus Forge Fathers, it'd be 4 dice versus 5 dice, counting your 4 pluses with an exploding 6. Draw it switches. And on the first turn, both coaches should re-roll. Yeah, fair enough. The coach that loses, the other coach can spend momentum to improve the result. So I'm guessing on the reference sheet. Oh no, it doesn't say it there. See the momentum section. So again, we're being pushed forward into a section of rules that we haven't explored yet. We don't even know what momentum is really. We haven't been told that yet. But yeah, you can use it to improve your result. This means you get the edge. The other coach can then spend momentum. Continue until one coach decides not to. Yeah, I get it, but that feels a bit clunky. I might go with a blind bid system instead, maybe. You can bid a number before rolling, and that will give you a plus, maybe even after rolling. That was me putting a number of tokens into a hand and then revealing. That's what I was going for there. That's a nice little system I like. Okay, so drives. Here we go. The game is split into 2 drives. Aha. Right, so drive 1, drive 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, yep, good. At the end of the first drive, players halted and players reset for the second drive. So, yeah, okay. So what you've got is you've got 5 turns, if you want to use basic terminology. 5 turns, or rather 5 rounds, during which each player will get to take a turn. And then you reset for 5 more rounds. It's a bit like your Blood Bowl halves, really. So yeah, you start by making an edge roll. You select your drive squad. 8 players chosen from your team. If you can't field 8, you field as many as possible. The rest of them are your reserves. Again, it'd be nice to have somewhere to put these, not just hanging around with the side of the board. Set them within your end zone. Set up, yeah. So basically, you make the edge roll, pick your team, pick your squads, which is like a part of your team you're going to use. Set up, spawn the disc, and the drive begins. Now, here we go. Here's the meat of the action. Okay, so here's a terminology thing straight away. During each turn, coaches take turns activating a single player. This is why I like the word round for you know, a thing. So I would say now, if I was writing this now, I'd say the game is split into 2 drives, each comprising 5 rounds, and in each round, each player takes a turn. That's just my standard terminology. You have rounds. Within each round, that means each player gets a turn. Within each turn, you might have phases, and within each phase, you might have steps. That's kind of the way I nest things to keep things consistent. So yeah, take turns activating a single player. Start with the team that has the edge. The active player makes a number of actions, after which he is marked as having been activated, and the other team activates a player. This continues until all players have been activated, at which point the turn ends. You should show which players have been activated by turning them around or using beads or counters. It's recommended that you use something as a reminder. So that's a weird wibbly-wiffly thing. And that comes from wargaming, where it's very much left up to the players how to do this sort of thing. And it's what Blood Bowl does, and I think Blood Bowl leaves it up to the players to track who's already been used. DreadBall's got around that really nicely now by having the markers for where your action tokens have gone. Yeah, basically, past James, don't do that. And yeah, so what we've got there is a player gets to activate. You get to activate your players once, one at a time. And yeah, you're going back and forth. One model, one model, one model, one model. People that are fans or have played, my other games will probably start seeing some things which I like in my design DNA, I suppose. There are certainly bits of Necromunda in this. With activating a player at a time, marking which player has been activated, and so forth. At the end of the turn, if you hold the disc, you get a momentum counter. Yep, cool. Oh, I think I missed a thing earlier, which is that every turn space gets a momentum counter, which goes to the player of the disc or gets shoved into the pool if no one's holding it. Yeah, that's cute. Which is a term I picked up from Robin Crodis, rules designer extraordinaire. He used to refer to things as cute, and I think he might have got it from Jervis Johnson, saying a rule is cute when you mean it's a bit twee. Yeah, fair enough. It's nice, but it's not necessary. It doesn't add anything, but it's a bit of fun. So here we go. Here are your actions. So you've got your action stat. So if I was a corporation runner, I would have 7 actions. Each action costs a number of points. As many points your action stat allows, and you can spend momentum to do more. So move into an adjacent hex, throw the disc, give disc to an adjacent friendly player, take it from an adjacent friendly player, or attack an adjacent enemy player. Now I remember this, taking the disc as an action. That was a thing which came out of a test where someone realised that once they had the disc, it was stuck to that player because that player had activated to pick up the disc, and then they just would hold that for the entire turn. So the ability to take it from them became quite important. That may have been a hint at a larger issue rather than something. This might have been a quick fix which wasn't sufficient, but that's the kind of thing playtesting would have borne out. So throwing. How does throwing work? That's a question, isn't it? Pick a target hex and draw a straight line. Ooh, straight line. So you need a ruler, basically. Passes through each one hex is occupied by a standing enemy. One of them can intercept. +2 if it's the first action you take in your activation, so if you haven't moved already, basically, or hit someone. +1 if the target's a friendly player. -1 for every 5 full hexes, or full 5 hexes, sorry. And -1 if the target is the enemy goal, and the thrower is in an enemy dead zone. Okay, yep, cool. And then you spend successes. So here's how actions work. You roll your dice, you get successes, and then you spend them. So here you have to spend the first one to be on target. If it lands the target hex, unless it's intercepted. If it was the enemy goal, you score. Each subsequent success can be spent to arc the disc. Each success spent this way gives a 1 die penalty to any attempt to intercept the disc. So, arcing. This was a thing which I put in the game back when it was end zone. In fact, I'm going to have a little rummage, I think, and try and find the original thing. Initially, there was a whole thing about discs travelling in arcs, kind of not going in straight lines. And there was a really complex system. There was no way to implement it. It was the kind of thing that would have worked in a video game, but would not work in a board game. And this is kind of where it ended up. This is like a homage to it. So let's see if I can find what we got here. Let's have a look. So this is my wonderful system for labelling things. End zone was what it was called before. It was called Razordisc. Oh, not responding. No, we're good. It's opening. Ah! End zone, or whatever it ends up being called. Awesome. So yeah, there's a lot of the same stuff here. Throw in the disc. What have we got here? Oh my goodness. Okay, now this is messy, but this isn't what I'm looking for. It's locked for editing. Yeah, don't open that. That's fine. Can we get, okay. Previous sets. Blimey. Version 0.1. Yes, have a look. This is gonna be rough and ready, and this is gonna be old. So yeah, this is gonna be embarrassing. 10, 15 players. Okay. Can we see throws? Oh, D10. This was D10s originally. Oh, D5 spaces away. This isn't it. What's happened? Why can I not find... Did it come in later? Did I dream the entire thing? Ooh, hang on. This looks more like it. No, that's not it, is it? No. No, here we go. Okay, you can arc the disc across the arena, choosing an arc depth between 1 and 4, and plotting the path of the disc as shown in the attached diagram. Can I just say that that should never be written in rules for a game. That is painful. Where's the attached diagram? Is there an attach? Oh, what's an ODG? Well, that looks like... Let's have a look. What is an ODG file? Open document graphics file. Well, will it open in Adobe, do you think? I don't think it will. Go on, give it a go. No. Okay, I will come back and try and figure out a way to open that. Unless this is it. Oh, look at that. Oh my goodness, I have no idea what the green part is. Will this give us any clues? Here we go. Oh, look at this. This video has just turned into me simultaneously mocking my past self and being incredibly self-conscious because I've just been mocked. What is that? Oh my goodness. Okay. So, throwing the energized disc isn't as straightforward as throwing a ball in more conventional sports, mainly because it refuses to travel in a straight line. It travels in graceful curves. This can confound novice players. All right, Treyguard. But it's one of the most important things to get used to. So I love the idea of this. The theory behind this is cool. Am I recording? I'm just paranoid again. I am recording. I love the idea of zipping discs around players. That sounds really cool. But yeah, this is a darling. When you write games, you get things that you love the idea of, and you try to fit them in, and you get increasingly convoluted, as demonstrated here. The answer is just to kill it and do something simpler sometimes. So a throw, italics, is made up of several arcs, italics. Each arc is a number of hexes in a straight line. Oh, sorry. after which the path changes direction by 1 hex side, either left or right. Hex side, this is a thing. Going back to DreadBall, it was a terminology thing of what is that 60-degree rotation. You know, what do you call that? But anyway, this is 1 hex side, left or right. Each arc was 1 hex longer than the previous one, so it arcs outwards. All direction changes must be the same way. Mark the disc path with path counters. Continuing until the path runs into the arena wall. So I remember playing this. I remember laying down loads of little counters, little tiddlywinks for where the path was going to be, and it looks cool. You know, it looks very video gamey. You can imagine if this was a video game, you'd get the thing, you know, shown. But no, this is no way to do it. This sounds much more complicated than it is. I'm not sure it does. So that's a player. That's the disc path. 2 hexes, then 3, then 4, then 5. Try it. You'll find yourself plotting arcs without a second thought after your first couple of throws. Will you, though? Once it's been plotted, you decide how hard you want to throw it by choosing a number of dice up to your power stat and throwing it at the same time. And it travels that many hexes along the path. Okay, yeah, see, I like it. I quite like the idea that you're, rather than throwing to someone, you're throwing a frisbee. It does feel like you're throwing a frisbee. How are you going to curve it, and how hard are you going to throw it? But in the same way that in Blood Bowl, you don't need to see exactly the way in which you pull back your arm and launch a ball. I don't think this level of detail is in any way necessary. This is a thing. So I was saying before about rules being cute. When a rule is too cute, it's a darling, unfortunately, and darlings need to be murdered. So yeah, let's just close that and close that and close all the things. Yeah, okay, cool. We're back on track. So that was a little digression. So yeah, as I say, this was the result of a darling being murdered, which is that you can spend successes to arc the disc around people, which gives penalties to interceptions. If your no success is the disc drifts, fair enough. Where from? Doesn't say, does it? So yeah, there's a mistake. Unless drifting tells you how it works. Maybe it does. Maybe I'm being really harsh on my old self. Can't even find it. Could be winding people up now by... here we go, yeah. Oh, it drifts from the target hex, okay. But that could really be said later. Just all of that, get all of that in the throw section. Just take it out of there, put it in the throw section. Interceptions are a thing. Yeah, I'm not going to go into great detail on this because what I'll do, I'll put the files up and you guys can tear them apart yourselves. If a single success is scored, the disc is immediately taken by the intercepting player, which adds a momentum point. Yeah, makes sense. See, I think actually what should happen is, just looking back on this and thinking this is a game I might develop later, if you intercept the disc, you should steal all of the other players' momentum or something. So if one player is getting really far ahead, but the plucky underdog grabs the disc, you can imagine the crowd goes wild and suddenly things are the other way around. That to me feels like a much cooler thing to do. Attacking, you can hit people. Yep. And you can use 1 success to push. And this is not in an order, so you can do this in any order you like. So 1 success pushes, 2 steals the disc. Equal to the stamina knocks them down. Stamina plus 2 injures them. So let's run some numbers on that. So a runner has got stamina 3. So if you roll, if it's runner on runner, which is kind of your most basic players, you're rolling 2 dice for your power, plus 2 if it's the first action you've made. I think actually what happened in DreadBall was better, which is that if you get a run up to a punch, it's more powerful. But yes, let's say you're rolling your 2 dice. Let's say it's your first action, so you're rolling 4 dice, and you get bonuses for holding the disc because it's a big razor sharp disc. So you get bonus points for hitting people with it, which I think is quite cool. It gives the disc carrier a little buff. So let's say you roll your 4 dice, you get 2, 3, 4, 6. If you roll your 6, get a 4, so that's 3 successes. You can use 2 of them to steal the disc if you wanted to, or I just did a thing, didn't I? Oh, what have I done? I've opened a new window. Yeah, so you could spend 3 successes to knock the guy down, or injure a knocked down target. Okay, so it's all kind of, yeah. See, I quite like it, but I just think that the spending successes after a dice roll makes sense in theory. The mechanic is sound, but for a sports game where it's about fast action, what you don't want to do is roll a dice and have to look at the dice and go, oh, well, I could do this or I could do this. You want it to be instantaneous. I'm a big believer that rules should fit the theme of the game, and so having a thing where you have to stop and check some dice on a table, that doesn't feel like a sports game. That feels more like a tactical strategy kind of thing. So yeah, that's why I think this doesn't work here. But as with any mechanic that doesn't work in a place, it might work somewhere else. So I would probably take this down and yoink it for later use. Arguably, it's not a million miles off the Silver Tower mechanic where you roll your dice at the start of the turn and then decide how you spend them. Yeah, pushing, very straightforward. Knocking down. When you knock someone down, they can't do anything. When they activate them, when they're activated, they make a recovery test, which is it acts like a 2 dice stat check. That's weird. So there's a weird thing, and a weird exception to how dice rolls work. You always make a stat check on a stat, but for recovery, you just have a 2 dice stat check. Just give everyone a recovery stat and make it 2 by default if you want to. But maybe some players are better at getting back up. That's surely a cool thing. And then the whole way you spend successes is done differently. So let's get it consistent. You can spend 1 success to stand up with 0 action points. You can spend 1 success to regain half your action points, or 2 successes to regain your full action points. That's 3 in total. And so that one must be the first one you spend, same as we've done with the throw. So yeah, injured players are removed from the arena. And you get momentum. Oh, I don't like that. On a D6 roll, it's a 50-50. A 1 to 3 is they're gone from play entirely. 4 to 6 they're put in reserve. Do something better with that, maybe. If nothing else, make it so that you can spend additional successes on your attack roll to modify that roll. Because if I've managed to get a stupid roll and rolled like 7 successes on a stamina 3 player, I want to know that he is dead. Yeah, cool. Emergency reserves. This is the thing. So I drank that really weird. I'm very conscious of how weirdly I just drank that drink, and now I'm drawing attention to it. I just had a weird Michael Gove moment. So yeah, at the start of each turn, if a team has fewer than the 7 players in the arena, they can use the emergency reserve system to teleport one of their reserves into play. Hooray! I quite like that. I think it's quite cool. Teleport your people into play. So if you're losing, you can potentially put someone into a useful place. You can, of course, telefrag people, which is an old school reference for people who are old school. Basically, you can teleport into their hex and blow them up, and yourself. Marking was kind of, yeah, you can mark people. What's blocking then? Yeah, okay, so rather than having a system where you have to dodge away from people like Blood Bowl's got and like DreadBall's got, DreadBall's got, you have to, if you start an activation marked, the marking player can block you. And blocks subtract action points. See, that's quite cool, because you've got an action point stat that's quite high. You can play around with it a fair bit. So you've got 7 action points, so you could potentially lose 3 or 4 of them and still be able to do some stuff. But, you know, you're going to have reduced options. I like that as a thing. Well done, Past James. Good rule. Yeah, cool. And momentum, here we go. So you can spend momentum after rolling a stat check to add a further dice to the pool. So that's interesting. So there is, whenever you have a dice pool system and you have points that let you add dice to the pool, it comes out to, you know, one of the questions you have to ask yourself is, do you add the dice before or after the roll? In this case, I've gone with after, which is good because it makes them more useful because you can see whether you need to add them, but it makes it less useful because you can just kind of keep going, I'll add 1. Yeah, I'll add one more. I'll add one more. You know, that kind of thing, which I'm not a big fan of doing. It just slows the game down again. You can spend them when a player runs out of action points to get more action points, or to spend 2 for a combo play. So, okay, this is quite cool. After you've thrown the disc to a teammate, they can immediately throw the disc again. So, and you can chain this. So you can actually spend. So even though it's one player at a time, you can chain several together. What the rules don't specify is whether that can happen with a player that's already been activated that turn, and whether they can. And if doing that stops them being activated later, I'm assuming the answer is no. But still, anyway, I think it's a cool rule. I think the momentum thing is a cool idea, and that's a cool use of it. So yeah, that's that. You can. It's also possible to earn momentum. Well, yeah, of course it is. Otherwise, you wouldn't get it, would you? Well, yeah, it's a small amount to start off with, I suppose. But yeah, you do that, and I think again that should be you get all of your opponent's momentum, or you swap momentum maybe, and that's silly. But yeah, you get all your opponent's momentum. Maybe that's quite cool. Maybe there should be like an underdog momentum bonus in some way. I don't know. Aha! Now here's the kicker. So this is one that always hounds games that have an alternate activation system. If one team has fewer players than the other, the coach of the team with the fewer players can choose to wait instead of activating their last player. So just on your last player, you can choose to wait. Yeah, fair enough. Stops outnumbering teams, getting an unrisk advantage. Yeah, fair play. Some tactical advice. That's good of me, isn't it? To write some tactical advice for my non-existent readership. Spread your team out, think before you act. Cover your goal, throw the disc, lay the boot in, and prioritise your targets. Yeah, lots of stuff there written in a fairly conversational tone. Again, I'm not sure who I'm writing it for, but it's good that it's there, isn't it? So yeah, that is Razordisc. In hindsight, I mean, it's not as bad as I remember it. I've kind of built it up in my mind as you know, it's a game that I wrote without really knowing what I was doing, whatever else. But actually, to be fair, I think there's a lot of redeemable features there. I think that to me feels like a decent test draft of a game. So going back to the process, this is one where, in theory, there's been a kickoff chat. There's been some R&D where the designers looked at other games that already exist, and they've done a first punt at a rule set. And I think that I mean, let's not think about the fact that this is actually the, I think, 5th draft of this, but I think that feels like a good test build, which would then be developed further into a playable game and then tested for weeks and weeks and weeks. And I think something good would actually come out of that. I think if I were the client, and this was presented to me, I'd say a few things. I'd say, you know, make the board much smaller. Don't worry about trying to make it sound like you're writing it for someone. Just write it. Just write it. You know, write it for the people that are going to be testing it. They don't need to know about backstory and whatever else. They want to know about mechanics. And yeah, just try and be more consistent with rules terms and how things work, and maybe rethink that whole spending successes thing. Maybe just a little chart which says 1 success does this, 2 does that, 3 does that, whatever. Or, you know, custom dice. Everyone likes custom dice, right? They're kind of in vogue right now. So yeah, that is Razordisc. This video has been an hour or so, I think. So I really hope you've enjoyed this. This has been a bit of a delve into memory lane for me, and yeah, I wanted to put it up here for you guys on Patreon. Thank you so much for backing us, and we're going to do some more of these. I've got other games, less kind of well-known things that I've worked on over the years, and I'd love to pull them apart in a similar kind of way. I'll put the files for this up online so you can have a look through yourself, and I will yeah, maybe at some point in the future do a redone version, and as I say, put it up as a free download on the NeedyCat website. I'm going to stop recording now and go and do some real work, but Thank you so much. You guys are awesome, and thanks for watching.